Okay, so when we run this, as we change this, it will change the value. Okay, and as we saw last week, the default number of decimal places for a floating point number is 6, as you can see there. So we'll change that now. Okay, so if we select the slider and look at our attribute inspector over here, you can see that you can change 3 things: the minimum value, the maximum value, and the current value that's shown when the application launches. And that's set to 0.5 at the moment. As you can see, that's correct. So let's change this so that the maximum value is 100. Okay, and let's change it so that the value that's shown to start with is 0. If we run that again. Okay, so now after loading, the value is 0, and as we move all the way up to 100. Okay, so the next thing we've got to fix is that getting rid of all of those decimal places. So if you remember from previous weeks, to change that, we need to modify this bit of code here, and all we need to do is say 0.0, and that will present the floating point number with 0 decimal places. So if we run that again, now we've got whole numbers 0 to 100. Now you notice when it first launched, the word label was still here. Okay, so there's 2 ways that you can fix that. You can fix it directly in the code by choosing your label and simply changing the text to 0. That's the easiest way to do it. Now when we run our application, the label matches the value. Okay. The second way to do that would be to write some code in the viewDidLoad method that set the value of this label to this string. Okay, so we could say self.sliderLabel.text equals 0 as a string. Okay, so that's the slider value, and so you can see there how easy it is to change the label to represent or to show what the actual current value of the slider is. Okay, the next thing that we're going to look at is this UI switch. Now, because a switch only has 2 values, it has on or off. We could use an if statement with an else section. So if else. So if the switch is on, put the string on into the label, else put the string off into the label. So we could do that, but we're going to use a switch statement, which seems appropriate for a UI switch. Now there's 2 cases, on and off, so we need to copy that, paste it. So we've got 2 cases here. Okay, so this is what's going to get evaluated. So we need to make reference to the UI switch. So self.mySwitch. Now the UI switch has a property called on. So just say dot on. You can see there that is a Boolean value, which means yes or no, true or false, 0 or 1. They're all the same thing. Okay, so you could put 0 in there and 1 in there. So off and on. So if it's off, we simply need to put off as a static string into our label, which is here. Okay, so we make reference to the label. So that is the switch label dot text equals. Now we don't need to do any of this NS string with format like we did before, because we're not mixing numbers and words, and we always know that it can only be on or off, so we can simply have a static piece of text, a static string as it's called there, because this will never change. When it's off, it can only be one word, which is off. And the alternative, case 1, is that it's on. Okay, so if we run that, off, on, off, on. And you would have noticed that when the application first launched, it was on, but our label still said label. So let's fix that. So like we did with this, let's just change it from label to saying on straight away. And then when we launch, it now says on and off and on and off. Okay, so that's our UI switch. And lastly, we're going to look at the stepper. Okay. So like we did with the UI slider, so almost exactly the same, make reference to the label first, self dot stepper label dot text equals, and the stepper is associated with a number. So again, we need to convert or display that number in a string. Okay, so it's going to be this NS string with format. Okay, NS string space string with format, and this time we're actually dealing with a double value. Okay, so we can use %f. And let's straight away put the 0 decimal places in. And where are we getting that number from? Well, we're referring to our stepper, self.myStepper.value. And you can see there it's a double. Okay, close the method. Okay, so the text of the stepper label, which is this, we're going to format that with the value that's coming from the object called myStepper. Okay, and let's change this value straight away. And we know that the range of stepper values can be 0 to 100 with an increment of 1 per time. So let's change this to 0 straight away. And then if we run that, okay, it starts at 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And we can't go any lower than 0. Now with the stepper, it has an inbuilt function that if you click once, it goes up 1, which is what we selected it to go up in a step up by 1 each time. But if you click and hold, it will ramp up and really go for it up to our maximum value, and the same in the minus direction. Click and hold. Okay, down to our minimum value. So that was inbuilt into the stepper itself. We didn't have to choose that functionality. Okay, so that's the stepper. Okay, so that's 3 different types of UI controls: the slider, the switch, and the stepper, and how to take the values from those UI controls and display them in a label. Okay, that's all I wanted to show you for today. Next week we're going to look at another control that is slightly different, which is called a picker. So I'll see you next week.